Hello and welcome. My name is Alaric, but you've probably seen me running around Twitter and MTG Arena and basically everything else game related as Platypus Jedi. Anyway, so today we're going to look at one of my favorite formats, possibly my actual favorite format in MTG Arena Historic Pauper. And you're probably here because you like Pauper, or maybe you like Magic, or maybe you saw a neat event on Arena and said, hey, what's this event and why can't I find any good deck lists anywhere? Regardless of why you're here, welcome. So I wanted to give you a quick breakdown of the format in addition to discussing the deck that I think is best. As while the format's only played with commons on Arena, which is not the largest card pool, especially when compared to traditional Pauper or any other format in Magic, there's still a lot of subtleties to it. Historic Pauper right now is built on three primary pillars. It's based on the first one, speed, which is largely defined by mono red burn. Non-interactable power, which is primarily defined by hexproof, but to a lesser extent is also defined by cards such as Ill-Gotten Inheritance, which are hard to handle in an opposing deck once they actually land on the field. And the third pillar, which is brute force advantage, which I think this deck does an excellent job of illustrating. So let's jump into the deck right now. You probably can see it right now. It's a blue-black control deck that of my own build, and I like it because it requires a lot of skill to play correctly, but has a lot of advantages for people who are willing to take the time to both learn the format and to learn the deck and the potential choices that are going into it. I disagree with a lot of people about blue-black. The current blue-black list that I've seen running around for the most part is a nearly creatureless control deck that relies on Ill-Gotten Inheritance to win. I disagree with this. I think you should be playing creatures, and I think you should be playing creatures that are expendable. So let's jump right into that. There's three main areas that I want to discuss. Let's start with the creatures. I'm playing 4 Aven Eternal, which I think is one of the most underrated Magic cards right now in Historic Pauper, as a 2/2 flyer, which is obviously below rate, because you wouldn't normally just play a 2/2 for 3, even if it did have flying. But what it comes along with is an extra 1/1 usually. Sometimes it'll build on that with a mass, but it's incredibly advantageous given how many cards in this format are X1s. So effectively, you should view it as a 2-for-1 and a can for 3. I used to play Aviation Pioneer, but obviously Aven Eternal is just better. Skeleton Archer. I like this as a one-of. It's an interesting value card, and the fact that it's a 3/3 helps a lot with blocking. There are a ton of 2-power creatures in this format, and there isn't a lot that goes up and over the top of it. It will trade with pretty much everything except for monsters out of the red-green deck or a suited-up hexproof creature. Finally, we have 2 Salvager of Secrets as a value card / value engine. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but the ability is very powerful, and I like this in the 5-drop slot. I've played around with other cards, but I don't like where other blue-black decks have gone. I've seen a lot of people talking about Soul of the Rapids, which, as people recall, is not an especially good Magic card. Soul of the Rapids here is a flying hexproof 3/2 for 5. I don't like this on 5. I think your creatures should be there to block. I think that if you're on 5 life against burn and you slam this on the field, you don't want to trade it for a Gitu Lavamancer. Whereas if you're playing my deck, you're going to be playing Salvager on 5, trading for that Gitu Lavamancer, and then having either one of your many removal spells, counter spells, or card draw spells on the next turn. And you're going to be gaining value. The other card that people play in this slot is Coldwater Snapper, which I do not think is a good Magic card. I think that if you're waiting around till turn 6, you're not really doing anything. And the fact that it's a 4/5 doesn't even trade profitably with most things, as Hexproof goes over the top of it. Doesn't really matter if you're building a 4/5 with Hexproof. They have a 10/10 with Hexproof. And it doesn't matter against monsters, as almost all the monsters have 5 power, at least in the second round if you're looking at Loathsome Chimera. So I don't think that those cards are actually where you want to be. You want to be on cards that aggressively trade and are always relevant. And I think you can really find that here with Even Eternal, and Salvager. Skeleton Archer is a bonus. I do think it is worthwhile, though, and I'll explain a little bit more why. The second pillar of the deck is the card advantage engine and card selection. I've been playing around with different numbers, but I actually think that 4 Omen of the Sea is correct. The extra scry on the back end is incredibly important. These slots used to be given over to Opts, but I actually don't mind paying the extra mana for the additional scry and for the additional bonus scry later, as this deck is highly reliant on drawing certain cards late, but is extremely good at doing that because of Secrets of Golden City, which we'll turn to now. You're fine with playing this as divination, but where it really shines is when you take this game to turn 10 or turn 20, and you're often going to be able to do that with this deck. When you're drawing 3 cards, you're going to have action, you're going to have answers to what they're doing, and you're going to find more Secrets of the Golden City, you're going to find Salvager to get more secrets, you're going to find Mystic Sanctuary to get secrets. You're going to find a way of just burying your opponent in advantage. And I really appreciate having access to that, as when you have so many cards, it almost doesn't matter what they're doing after a certain point. There's only a few relevant cards that they're actually playing. Additionally, I have a Recover in this slot, which I've tooled around with Forever Young and a few other cards, but I actually like Recover the best because you don't care about the creatures. What you actually care about is the cards, because what you're primarily playing is removal. So it doesn't matter if you recur multiple creatures. Really, you only want one of them, primarily Salvager, but sometimes you want an Aven or something else just because that's what is there. And then you actually want to draw the card off of it. So that creates a nice little loop, especially once you get to ungodly amounts of mana with Salvager. I've played many games where I can recover a Salvager, play the Salvager, gain the Recover back, play the Recover for a second Salvager, and just continue on with this. It makes for a very difficult to deal with threat for the opponent. That primarily covers the card advantage. We obviously have 2 Mystic Sanctuary. I think 2 is correct. You don't want too many of your lands to be coming into play tapped. I ended up deciding against the new cycling lands, which were released in the second anthology. I don't think it's a smart move at this time. I'm firmly on 4 Dismal Backwater, and then I'm on 2 Guild Gates. I think that maybe I would consider replacing these with cycling lands, but at the same time, I'm loath to do so right now. All right, let's take a look at the removal suite. It's a little all over the place, but I think that it's correct right now. Oh, one more thing. Clear the Mind is your answer against the long game. I like this over a second Devious Cover-Up. It just recycles all of your cards, and it's a little harder to resolve Cover-Up at times, as they're more likely to fight over it in the blue-black mirrors. Anyway, going onwards to removal. I play 1 Fungal Infection. I think this is correct. I think it gets negated far too much right now. Not negated as in the magic card negate, but as in the sense of there are too many higher toughness creatures that it just doesn't interact with. And I've been playing around with the numbers. At one point I was playing 2 Fungal Infections and 3 Moment of Craving, but Moment of Craving is just too good for you in the early game, especially against red. The hands when you have it compared to the hands when you don't are night and day. So Moment of Craving, obviously a backbone against all of your aggro decks, incredibly important against burn, as it kills all of their creatures and also gains you the life. I'm going to come back to Bladebrand in a second, as it's an interesting choice, but I actually think it's one of the most difficult to understand cards and the most intelligent choices I've made with this deck in the last month and a half in rebuilding it. I've been playing blue-black for about 18 months now, in largely the shell with Aven Eternal, or with Aviation Pioneer before that, but it's really come into its own recently, in the last 6 months or so. I'm playing 3 Essence Scatter. I think this is correct. We're still a largely creature-based format, and having a 2-mana hard counter to creatures is wonderful. I decided not to go heavily onto the counter route. I'm only playing 2 cancels and then a Devious Cover-Up as the rest of my counter suite. I think this is correct. I actually was playing Thought Collapse / Didn't Say Please before, but I realized that the mill was actually detrimental because we are now playing in a format with Escape. And after a few matches, I decided it wasn't worthwhile to mill them for 3 when it turned on their Escape or flipped over Escape cards. This is a minority of the matchups, but at the same time, there's no reason to give them free cards when you don't have to. So that's why I'm playing Cancel now, as milling out the opponent is not hugely relevant. When you do it again in a blue-black mirror, you're still going to be fine. You just have to rely on your Clear the Mind, Devious Cover-Up, Mystic Sanctuary game. So for the rest of the removal suite, I play 2 murders and 1 bake into a pie. I like this split. I like the extra permanent you get off bake into a pie and the life, obviously. The permanent is relevant for Secrets of the Golden City, which you have to keep in mind. Omen of the Sea is a good addition that has really helped us out in Theros as well. We play 2 Toll of the Invasion. This comes across as another one of those little 2-for-1s. It's also useful interaction against Hexproof if you can tag them on turn 3, because the earliest they can play a Hexproof creature is turn 3. So if you're on the play, you can play this, take their Hexproof creature, and move on. Alternatively, in control matchups, this is highly useful as something that'll break through and get a counterspell. These are effectively 2 extra counterspells against decks that are more controlling. And you can also take important cards such as Ill-Gotten Inheritance from mono black and from black white. Talking about Ill-Gotten Inheritance, we're now on 2 Frika's Libations. I've been kicking around the correct number of this, and I think 2 is the right number. You can recur it with Mystic Sanctuary and with Salvager, and it's highly relevant in both the green-white hexproof matchup, which is very popular, and against both blue-black and mono-black as they play Ill-Gotten Inheritance. It is a little bit difficult to play against green-white hexproof, as they will manufacture a certain number of guys in addition to the one that they load up, but at the same time, we can fight around that as needed, and it's nice to have the extra flexibility in that slot. I don't like it in a lot of matchups. It's awful against red, but at the same time, it's a necessary evil given that about 35% to 40% of the metagame right now is green-white hexproof. And this almost always has a great target, whether it's a hexproof creature that you're making them sacrifice, or whether it's Ill-Gotten Inheritance. All right, let's go back to Bladebrand, as I said I would. Bladebrand is the most recent addition to the deck. It was a concession to the hexproof decks, as nowadays they play Ancestral Mask from the second anthology. That means they don't have Dub anymore. Dub was important because it gave them first strike. Now you can actually block a hexproof creature and kill it with Death Touch. You can also cycle it in matchups where this isn't relevant, or you can trade up in green-red monsters, or in other matchups where they build a big enough threat that you can't handle. It also is useful against, hey, look, our old friend Coldwater Snapper. So if they're on the Coldwater Snapper deck, you're in business here. You just need to have a 1/1 that can block. So I'm actually a big fan of Bladebrand overall, and it's been an incredibly strong card. It's something that they never see coming, because really, who expects Bladebrand in a constructed format? The fact that it cycles and then you trade your, oh look, here's my 1/1 amass, trading up for your 10/10. The only disadvantage nowadays, and I've lost this several times, is because the hexproof decks play Stetson tactics. Sorry, not tactics. The Stetson Training. Sorry, Tactics is from the original Theros, and I used to play that a bit. Stetson Training, which gives Trample most relevantly. So I have been killed when they go over the top with Ancestral Mask, or possibly 2 Ancestral Masks, and Training. However, you can usually go to a fairly low life total against hexproof decks, as they don't have a lot of reach. So I think that pretty much summarizes everything in the main deck. I'll quickly talk about the sideboard. The sideboard isn't highly relevant, but it's my box of things that I would consider playing. As you can see, we've got Blink of an Eye in case I wanted something with a little more bounce. Same with Callous Dismissal. Forever Young is that slot that I was talking about. Mind Stone, I've considered this in the past. Aviation Pioneer in case I wanted more Even Eternals. Cloudkin Seer, which I've played until recently, but in the end it was good, but it didn't fit the same. It didn't have enough synergy with our theme. Thirst for Meaning is additional draw spell and something to discard lands in the late game. Mephetic Vapors, which I see a lot of lists playing, but I don't think is correct. I think that it doesn't hit enough, and often you're just playing it to surveil 2 in a lot of matchups, as it's either really good or it's really bad. Cruelty, I like this given that there's a lot of escape creatures in the format now, but at the same time, I dislike it because you can't kill a non-hexproof creature that has Ancestral Mask. Frika's Libation, this one's still here, but probably should be replaced given that I already have 2 in the main deck. Spark Reaper. This is an interesting concession to pacifism, and I'd consider playing this in the future, but I don't think that this is right for the moment. I think in best 2 out of 3, I would consider playing this as a concession to pacifism, because otherwise they can lock your amass tokens, which is an issue. Ill-Gotten Inheritance, I've considered playing 1 to 2 of these as an answer to, guess what? Ill-Gotten Inheritance. Reaper of the Night, I've seen blue-black decks playing this. I think this is good, but I think it's ultimately very slow and clunky, and you can't rely on that against the fast decks. You need something that immediately affects the board. Syncopate, I played Syncopate in the past. Ultimately, I like counterspells that are fixed in their mana cost because the games do go very long. Finally, Bazooka Bog, which I think is very good, but I'm not sure I'm willing to dedicate the slot to right now, as having your lands come into play untapped, especially in the first 5 turns, is incredibly relevant. Usually the first 6 turns. You can give up a couple of turns. You can usually give up turns 1 and 4, but at the same time, if it comes at the wrong time, it's going to be such a huge blow, and you're going to need to play it for very little value. So I think that pretty much summarizes everything. I'll be putting together another video soon with a run-through of this deck, and we'll play it with hopefully some interesting opponents and hopefully some interesting games, and hopefully we'll win a bunch with it, but we'll just have to see until next time. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Happy to chit-chat a little bit about this deck. I do think it's extremely good right now. You do really need to know what cards are important, though, in each matchup. And I'll be talking about that when I actually record the video for the event. Thank you very much. Hopefully you have a great day.